All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live here. This is the one and only MMFM Digital. I am your host, JL Martinez, with another exciting week in the film, media, and entertainment industry. It is now approaching late May in Miami. We're trying to open up things. We don't know how things are going to go. But in the meantime, there's so much content that you can have access to. I'm going to be honest. I did a 14-day free trial to Quibi. I know that was a big investment, even though I know I can cancel it and I won't be charged. But I will say that there is one show that has really caught my attention, and I hope you all watch it. It's a fascinating show. It's Kirby Jenner, ladies and gentlemen. That show is freaking hilarious. I mean, I think that after all these decades now of watching the Kardashians and the Jenners, we finally found a sibling with talent. Kirby Jenner. He's hilarious. This guy is the real deal, and I love the fact that the Jenners and the Kardashians are playing along, and it's just really entertaining stuff. So, it's only 5 minutes, so, if you see it and you didn't like it, I've only wasted 5 minutes of your life, essentially. That's the good thing about Quibi. So I hope you guys check it out. And in the meantime, my guest today, which I want to introduce, is the absolutely lovely and talented good friend of mine, an amazing agent now at Verve in Los Angeles. But she's had an entire breadth of experience in the industry, from the talent agency world to creative development, production companies, the whole deal. So it is my absolute pleasure right now to welcome the one and only Gina Reyes. Hi, Gina.
Hi, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to watch that Quibi show now, by the way. Great review.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because, again, there have been so many articles in the trades lately about how it's kind of been struggling and hasn't really been able to catch a foothold. But as we know, it really just takes one show. And I think Kirby's got the chops. I really do.
You're going to make me download Quibi just to watch it.
Download Quibi. Again, it's 14 days of free content, so what do you have to lose?
That's
right?
True. Yeah.
So except I guess, you're downloading and then you've got to erase the app from your phone, which is kind of annoying if you don't like it. But, we kind of do that anyway, right?
That's true.
I still hang on to the Domino's one. That's a really good one because you get points. So that one helps out. Friday night pizza.
Great tips.
Hey, every time you spend $10, you do that 7 times, you get a free medium, whatever you want.
Oh, I had no idea.
It is an amazing deal. And speaking of amazing deals, I'm so happy that you're joining us here today. As you know, ordinarily we would be doing this in June at the beautiful Biltmore that you've been to before. But we're a little bit on a technical hiatus right now due to the situation. But I'm so happy that you can join us once again here in this digital format. And, this is just going to kind of be a loose conversation about sort of your journey through the industry. So, tell us a little bit about, sort of where you're from, where you grew up. I know you're from the Chicago area, right?
Yeah, I'm from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, lived a little bit in Mexico when I was little, but was born and raised in Chicago for the most part. And I moved to LA right after college. Well, actually, I was still in college. I was doing a semester in LA program through our film department in college, and then graduated here, basically. And I never went back to Chicago.
Right. So you stayed in Tinseltown.
Yeah. I planned it that way because I didn't have money to go back. So I was like, well, I'll just figure it out.
Right. There you go. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Get yourself a one-way ticket and say, I don't have another option.
Exactly.
It's either that or asking for change on the Santa Monica Pier. One of the two.
Yeah.
That's my funniest homeless story in LA. I got to tell you, to be honest, I was near Santa Monica Pier, and there was literally this homeless dude, and he had a sign, and he was sitting there, very elegant, homeless guy, and he said, "I'm going to be honest. I need money to take a wine tasting course." And I was like, dude, I gave him $5 just because of the fact that it was so creative that he wasn't beating around the bush. And not only, did the guy want to drink, he wanted to educate himself on the whole industry. which I thought was kind of cool.
Okay.
But anyway,
yeah.
that was a very long time ago. So, so tell us sort of about your first entree into the industry. You started at ICM, right?
Yeah, I started at ICM. I interviewed at all the major talent agencies. Through my program at school, we had agents come in and talk to us. And one of our teachers told us, like, in order to really get into Hollywood, you had to work at a major agency. And so I applied everywhere, I interviewed everywhere, and ended up being hired at ICM because of you. I replaced you.
Well, no, I always say it's because of you. You had obviously the skill set early on, and you were so willing to learn and just so enthusiastic about it, and that's really, that really was sort of what caught my attention, and obviously eventually everyone else's at the agency, because you had a nice run there, right? A couple of years, more or less.
I was there a full year. I did my 1 year, and then I moved on. I went to go work for Salma Hayek.
Right on. That's right. Yeah, you transitioned to the production company world, and with a major star, Salma Hayek. How was that transition?
It was really cool. So at the agency, for me at the time, I did not want to be an agent. I really wanted to focus on trying to get a job in film development. I love film. I love books. And so I was trying to figure out a way to do that, and I had no idea how. Um, and so I did my 1 year of being an assistant. And lucky for me, at the end of that year, there was this announcement that came out in Variety where Salma Hayek had just gotten an overall deal with MGM for film development. And she had a deal with ABC for television. And so I just read that and said, oh my God, this is who I need to go work for. She's got this new company. I need to find my way there. And so I asked all of our friends at the agency and the assistants if they knew anybody at Salma's new company. And one of the assistants did, because they were talking to them about a client of ours, a director, and made the introduction. And I ended up being hired as the development assistant for the company. And that was like the last position. Yeah. So that's how I got in there. And it was nerve-wracking because, I had just come up on my 1 year, and my boss, Craig, was like, what the fuck? What do you mean you're leaving? I'm like, I got this job. And it was really scary for me because I was like, oh my God, how do I tell him?
Right.
The whole thing. But I did it.
Right. But yeah, because obviously, like you said, you knew early on within a year that you didn't want to be an agent and that this was kind of your path, right? So it makes sense. It took you a year. It took me about 3.5 to figure that out. But so I'm glad that you figured it out sooner.
Well, for me, for some reason, I thought I was like always running out of time. I'm like, I have to hurry up. I have to get it done. And when I worked at ICM, going into ICM, I knew that I wasn't going to be an agent at the time. That was my path to try and figure out how to get into development.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, you learned the ropes, you made that transition, and now you're doing all this development stuff with Salma Hayek. And so how long were you with that company?
I was with Salma for like 5 years, basically. So she had a 2-year deal with MGM. And that meant she had to find IP, or she had to find movies to make under the MGM umbrella. And even though I was a development assistant, I took that job very seriously. I was almost like a creative executive. Like, I read everything. I read like the newspaper every day. I read all the magazines. I read every book. I read everything just to try and find stuff for us. And I brought in a couple of projects. One was In the Heights by Lin-Manuel Miranda. That's when I was
Right.
like off Broadway, going to Broadway. And I also brought in a book called The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, when it was a manuscript, and Scott Rudin took it.
Wow.
But I got to meet both Lynn and I got to meet Juno because I was like super aggressive and like just thought, like, oh, I'm just gonna get these people.
Right.
And then the deal with MGM was up after 2 years. There was a change in leadership at MGM. And so her deal was not renewed. And then she started doing more movies and whatnot, and her assistant quit. So she asked me to be her assistant. So like I became development assistant, production assistant, everything. And so I went with her. And I went on my first feature, which was Grown Ups with Adam Sandler and with Salma. And I went on first like TV set, which was like 30 Rock with her. We lived in New York together. We lived in Boston together. Wow. It was great. And I ended up being with her for the last 3 years, like just working with her on a very personal level and traveling and whatnot.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Plus, you probably got to hang out with Adam Sandler, which is kind of cool.
I did. He's really nice.
Right. And then, so, after that, just, very fascinating run, then you kind of transition into, if I'm not mistaken, into Fox. You got a gig at Fox, right?
Yeah. So after 5 years, Salma's deals with MGM and ABC were basically coming to an end. And Salma's life was transitioning on a personal level. She had gotten married. Her husband was based in Paris. She had a daughter. And so she moved to Paris. And at the time, I started to realize that I really wanted or I needed to have studio or network experience. And I wanted to find a way to get into that system. And so a friend of mine told me that there was a creative executive position available at 20th Century Fox Film and recommended me for it. And after like extensive interviews for over a month, I got the position.
Oh, wow.
And so I became a CE, a creative executive in feature development at 20th. And 20th at the time was the biggest arm of Fox Film. So we developed and distributed films like X-Men, Planet of the Apes, those type of big tentpole films. And so, yeah, I got that position, which was a dream and very coveted position for me. At the time there was like, 5 major feature studios in the world.
Yeah.
And each studio maybe has 1 or 2 creative executives, junior executives, like the position I was doing. So obviously there's not that many positions. And I had one of them, which was huge for me. And it was also like a very, it was like a boot camp. You know how agencies are boot camp? Creative executives is a boot camp in an executive role. And so it was intense. It was basically 24/7 reading scripts, reading material, doing notes, making lists of writers and directors, being an executive, having meetings every day, talking to, being part of the decision process and the green lighting of films that, most of the world gets to see. So it was pretty intense.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal because you're ultimately like some of the films you mentioned, whether it's the X-Men or the Planet of the Apes, you're talking about budgets that creep up into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So every decision is critical, right? And so that process has to be pretty intense. right? To get to
Yeah.
that point.
It could like make or break your career if you make one decision. If you decide, I'm going to buy this movie that's going to tank in the box office, they could be like, Gina, you suck.
Right.
You don't know how to make movies. Get out of here.
Right. But I'm sure they didn't say that.
No.
But that's awesome. And then so you did that for a while in terms of creative development, and then you transitioned more to the TV side, right?
Yeah. So that was at a time when TV was getting really good. And initially I was like, and I think most of us were like like film snobs, like we all were like, oh, we love film, and that's mostly what we concentrated on. But then TV started getting really good and everybody was watching television. You had filmmakers writing television shows and directing television shows. And so the TV side of Fox approached me because they needed a creative executive to run a diverse writers program that they had for the TV side of Fox, for the network and the studio. And so they needed somebody to run this restructured program. And that was interesting to me. It gave me the opportunity to go into television and still work with writers and directors, but it was a very different business from my current business. I was working with top level writers and directors in film. And the TV side, it would be more looking for emerging writers and directors to bring into the Fox studios and see if there was a way to bring them onto the Fox shows, whether it was FX shows, Fox Broadcasting, 20th Century Fox, Fox 21. So it was both cable and broadcast shows. And so that to me was interesting. And I also would get the opportunity to learn television, because television is a very different system from film. And at the time I didn't know that. And so I went into the TV side and I ran the writers program. And then a year later, the Directors Guild of America mandated all the studios to have a diverse directors program, and Fox didn't have one. So I had to start one. So I developed it and ran it and started one with like all female filmmakers. At the time, there wasn't a lot of, there was a need for female filmmakers in television or female directors, but there weren't a lot. And so I focused on bringing in female filmmakers into television and try and find opportunities for them to direct in TV. So most of my career at Fox as an executive, I was on the TV side, running the writer and director labs, and they actually became pretty successful. Most of the writers and directors that went through those labs got staffed or hired on Fox shows. And if they didn't, because of the quality of the writers and directors we were bringing in, they were hired by other networks or studios. And now they're repped by major agencies and have pretty successful careers. So it was really good. I loved it.
Yeah, no, I mean that sounds like an amazing experience, and it's interesting, because when you're inside sort of those guarded gates of the studio world, there's a lot that goes on in terms of what people think actually goes on in there, and obviously from an outsider looking in, you see the physical production, the sound stages, the sets, but really I think the most valuable thing that's guarded in those studios is the talent and the IP. Those are the things that the studios are really latching onto. And it's folks like yourself that curate and nurture that talent and that IP, which winds up being what we see, in a movie theater, or I guess now streaming, right?
Yeah, that's the most important part, I think. Obviously, the whole process is important, right? You need the entire process in order to get something made. But I realized very early on that I wanted to be I guess, the boss. And, when I was like a production assistant, when you're on the ground on the production making the thing, you really don't have any say in what the thing is, right? That you're making. You're just there making sure that you're making that TV show, or you're making that film, or you're doing whatever it is that you need to do to make it happen. I wanted to be the person that actually read the book and was like, oh my God, this is such a great book. It should be a movie. Or this is such a great book. It should be a TV show. And that's what a development executive does, or I wanted to be the one that's like, oh, well, I want to hire this writer to adapt this book to make it into a show. Or I want to hire this director to direct the movie or direct the TV show. I want to be the person doing that. And so that was the position, the role as a studio executive. And because you're there from the beginning.
Yeah, no, for sure. So essentially you want to be the Latina Robert Evans, right? You want to say the kid stays in the picture.
Yeah.
El niño se queda en la película, I guess that's how you say. That's great. And so you had this amazing journey at Fox, but then you decided to sort of evolve your career once more, and you wind up, I think it was a little while after that, you were at Storyhouse and Univision, right?
Yeah. So I obviously have a lot of interests, but Fox was coming to an end, as everybody knows now, right? So Disney bought Fox, but at the time we knew something was happening with Fox, but we weren't really sure. Fox was changing a lot. My department was changing. My whole department got let go except me. I was like basically doing everything myself, which was fine because we were a very lean group anyway. And I also realized with streamers like Netflix, that there was a lot of more international content being produced. And a lot of it was in Latin America, Mexico, Latin America, Spain, like with like Narcos and whatnot, like stuff like that. Or like the Italian shows like Gomorrah, which I love, right? And so there was this opportunity for me to become an executive at this new company called Storyhouse, which was a new studio through Univision. And the goal was to make English and Spanish language shows for Netflix. They had a deal with Netflix. And that sounded interesting to me because, of course, I'm Latina. I speak Spanish, and I wanted to be able to utilize all of my skills to try and get into this new market. And so I was hired as director of development at Storyhouse, and my job was to find, just like I was doing at Fox, writers and directors, but also content that would essentially we can develop into a TV show for Netflix. And so I had to find talent in the US, but also in Latin America that we thought would be good to bring in, get ideas, develop them, make a show. And with Storyhouse, I was there a year. It was a new company, so they're trying to find their footing. While I was there, we made a Chapel that is on Netflix. And then we developed another show called Tijuana, which is also on Netflix as well. And then after a year, I got offered another position at Mitú, the digital company, as VP of development for both TV and film.
Right.
And so I thought that was interesting because, Mitú has a huge audience, and their focus was to develop content for the U.S. English-speaking audience, Latino English an audience. That was their goal. But then, you know, Mitú has gone through a lot of changes. So after I think maybe 3-4 months, they got rid of like the whole narrative content department and just kept doing unscripted, basically.
Right. They went into the Kirby Jenner land.
Exactly.
and then to just kind of bring it all full circle, you ended up becoming an agent. So essentially, you ended up joining Verve as a TV lit agent and representing most talent, primarily directors, right, on the TV side.
I represent both writers and directors. I came in with more directors, but I do both. Yeah, so during my time at Fox, I realized while I was finding and cultivating all this emerging talent that I really loved doing that. You know, I was an executive at Fox, but I was kind of like a internal manager per se for these writers and directors. And it was really important for me once we brought them into the labs that they actually had real opportunities. It wasn't just like, hey, you get to come to a lab and listen to an executive talk and, you know, it's a teaching moment. No, I wanted it to be an effective lab. And so for me, it was very important to try and find ways to get the writers and directors jobs, like real meaningful jobs that will actually, you know, move the needle for them in their career. And so in doing that, I realized that I really love working with writers and directors on a more like personal level, but like in a way, like an agent, try and find them opportunities. And I really love that. And so a lot of my writers and directors, like I said before, became very successful from Fox. And people started noticing that and started representing them. And so Verve reached out to me knowing that and asked me if I was interested in becoming an agent. And I actually was. I was like, oh, that actually sounds very interesting to me because that means that I get to do what I love, which is, you know, look for writers and directors. My focus, you know, now knowing myself more in terms of the type of talent I like are, you know, I focus on women and diverse storytellers. And so being an agent, I get to do that. I get to represent writers and directors that I really believe in, and then I get to find meaningful opportunities for them. And I get to stay with them throughout their career, hopefully. You know, as an executive, they would leave, and I'm like, oh no! Yeah.
The project is over. They're on to the next thing. But yeah, it's true in terms of the career and the opportunities. So, you know, obviously, you know, we're in a very particular time right now, and we talk about opportunities. Sort of, you know, when we finally, hopefully, as a nation, come out of this situation that we're in, do you see new opportunities, particularly for minority writers and directors and filmmakers and storytellers? Considering that, you know, we're in a time now where maybe the big tentpole type movies will have to wait a minute, and these sort of smaller, more story and character driven stories may have a chance to see more of the limelight. What do you think is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely opportunities right now in television when it comes to writers. You know, you have people hiring a lot of writers right now, having them write television shows or having them adapt something in preparation for production to open up. So, you know, writers can write anywhere. Writers can write at home. So right now, writers are doing really well. In terms of directors, you know, there's no production. So directors are not doing well right now. But, you know, the DGA, the Guild, OSHA, the studios, the directors themselves, they're all trying to figure out creative ways of getting production going, basically creative and safe ways. And so those
Right.
conversations are actively going right now. And then it also depends on the country where the shoot will be, right? So if it's in Canada, Canada will probably open up soon. England, India, China's open right now. New Zealand's gonna open soon. Everybody has different timelines in terms of opening, but everybody's looking at it right now and trying to figure it out, or trying to figure out like, oh, if we open up in September, this production, what do we need to do? Do we need to fly up the directors, have them quarantine for 2 weeks, and then only use a couple of directors for the entire show? That way we know they're quarantined and they're safe. They're getting tested every day. The actors the same way, they're being quarantined. So all of those things are being discussed now. In terms of big tempos, that's a whole different conversation, obviously, right? That's like a huge production. And so you got to think of insurance. Is an insurance going to insure the production of that magnitude? And, it's like more risky right now. And so you have studios looking at content that's a little bit, like you said, more character driven, content that can be shot maybe in one location, things like that in order to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I've said it for a couple of weeks now that I think that we will enter the golden age of the independent producer. I think that the small sort of these small crews, these small productions that are able to pivot quickly, do things with minimal crew and minimal locations are going to be the first ones that are able to sort of come out of our situation and do things effectively and safely. And that the bigger movies are going to have to wait a minute. I think eventually it will come back. But I think particularly, when you're talking about minority and diverse stories and sort of, just kind of exposing our community to the world, I think it could actually be a very interesting time, for folks from at least from the independent community, from a writer standpoint, a producer standpoint, and a director standpoint.
Yeah, and I think, even prior to the pandemic, I think diverse stories were being sought after, Now, the studios, networks, the buyers are realizing that the audience is diverse and they respond to diverse stories. And so now I think there's a much bigger need and want for that. Definitely.
Right on. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Gina, this has been an amazing session, and I just wanted to thank you again for your time. And obviously, congrats on everything you've done and everything you're yet to do, because obviously you still have such an amazing trajectory in this industry. And if you ever evolve again, I see you owning your own production company in the future and being that Latina Robert Evans. So that's.
I hope so.
Yeah, just make sure I stay in the picture, Gina.
You're in the
picture. But yeah, it's been amazing chatting. I know you've got a busy day. We all do. We're trying to, continue sort of at least in a virtual sense, continue the train of the content industry going. So I really, again, I appreciate your time. And I'm going to do a quick sign off. I'll put you on hold and we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the amazing Gina Reyes. She's an amazing talent agent. She's worked in production. She's worked in development, a creative executive, lots of amazing nuggets. As you know, our live broadcast will turn into video format so you can watch them later. I really do hope you check out Gina's chat. There's a lot of amazing nuggets in there in terms of, developing your career, both on the creative business and production side. So I hope you check it out later. Until then, on behalf of the Miami Media and Film Market, Camacol, I am J.L. Martinez, your host, and this has been another MMFM Digital. Until the next time, as I always say, happy streaming.